many people think that internationalization is a good thing. It's a move towards a more modern world, a world where nations are joined together. So they would go along without thinking very hard about the technicalities. They go along with something like a single currency. A lot of my work was actually about the technicalities. And although, and actually, if you read it now, some of it is incredibly perceptive. I mean, I say awfully rather boastful, but it's true. Mm-hmm. It was incredibly perceptive. And some of the problems that they've got now, I said they're going to have these problems. But a lot of the debate was in generalities, it's very mean. Historians think one way, economists think another, Mm-hmm. And Cole was a historian. Yeah. So he couldn't get into nitty-gritty. And it really was that a lot of the nitty-gritty things needed to be sorted out. I was actually, to be honest, I was surprised how it was much more successful than I thought it was going to be. But whether it's been a good thing, I think people in Britain are very pleased we stayed out.
Yeah. But were you surprised about how successpay?
Yes, I was surprised. I can quite have to say that. When I wrote my papers back in the early 1990s, I put it a whole mass of technical problems, which then did have political significance. And I said, for example, that the central bank will have to act as lender to governments in some circumstances.
Lender of last resort.
As lender of last resort to banks, but it also in practice is very likely every now and again to have to lend to governments. Now, the question then is, how much does it lend to each particular government? All right? You're straight into politics. And so, May 2010, we had the first major crisis weekend where Sarkozy threatened to take France out of the single currency altogether unless Germany accepted that the European Central Bank could buy large quantities of Greek government bonds. And so you were straight into this issue, which in fact that flagged up in 1992. This was a technical issue which was foreseeable at the start, had not been dealt with in the treaty, and in the end was massively political.
Because the eurozone was a political project and didn't look at the economic factors. Is that what you're saying?
That's a sort of put it in a nutshell, yes. But actually is this all being recorded now?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. It was always a political project. But obviously there are economic aspects to it. There are also what I'd call kind of organizational aspects, institutional aspects. And these are very complicated. But when push came to shove, they always had a political element to them. And so the debate in Britain, right from the word go, was partly about the politics, and that being the overriding consideration. You can't have monetary union without political union. But then a whole mass of rather, if you like, macroeconomic, rather complicated issues. And I should say here that I don't think the debate, this probably sounds a bit condescending, the debate in other European countries was not at this level. In fact, I remember one of the architects of single currency, a chap called Tommaso Padoa-Schioppa, Italian, coming to London to a dinner in the early 1990s saying, "You have a wonderful debate here," although he didn't like what was coming out of the debate. So we had a very big debate at a high level in the political and in the media and so on.
Can a eurozone work if there is a political union?
Of course it can. Let's just be clear, around the world what we have is a single nation, single currency, single government, single legal system, single set of public finances, single currency, single banking system, and so on. We have an example of this when Germany united in 1990. We had I think the monetary union came first, but then East and West Germany united 6 months later. Fine. Within 2 or 3 years, the mark was accepted all over Germany. There is now consolidated public finances, consolidated treasury, a single German government. It all worked. But that was because you had full political union at the same time, more or less, as you had currency unification.
Yeah. And normally you have a political union first before you start a monetary union. Is that the historic process?
Yes, in the German case, you actually, of course, in 1990, you actually had the monetary union slightly before political union, but they were more or less, they were more or less simultaneous.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should say here that because Germany itself evolved in the 19th century and to some extent the 20th century from this process of the Zollverein, a common trading area, currency unifications, gradual currency unifications, this taking place over a period of decades in the 19th century. And to some extent, the Germans probably see the process of European unification according to the same model. That they see the political union coming with monetary union bit by bit and so on. And in fact, of course, the question is whether there is the same degree of political identity, of national identity among all the different European states.
So you say it's possible, but then the next question is a political union possible?
The key question is, will there be political union across all these different European nations? There are different cultures, different legal systems, different cultures, different languages. And one has to say that as of now, that doesn't look very plausible. And quite frankly, the attempt to accelerate this process by having a single currency has, if anything, put a distance between different European nations, and obviously critically at the moment between Germany and Greece.
Have we seen in that perspective both a shift in both the electorate and the establishment? In the countries we always thought they were traditionally Europhile, they've made a move to the more Eurosceptic side.
I think the driving force behind European unification, it differs from country to country, but the driving force has been, if you like, from the top. It's been the political class supported by the bureaucracy. There is, of course, the national bureaucracies and there's the European bureaucracy. They all know each other. They move in between. They have, sometimes somebody can work in a national bureaucracy, they go to the European bureaucracy in Brussels and so on. They want integration. They want unification. But the electorate as a whole, people as a whole, they don't necessarily want that. People in Spain regard themselves, first of all, as Spanish. They may like the fact that they belong to the European Union, but they still are Spanish. Or people in Greece, at the moment, they very definitely are Greek. So and just to give an example, the Irish broke away from the United Kingdom because they were Irish, not British. So we have, if they did that, then they really are Irish, first of all, not European. And so this attempt to have a European nation is doomed to fail because it doesn't respect what the peoples of Europe are.
Yeah. So what's going to happen with the eurozone now? What's a likely scenario, starting with Greece?
There are a number of issues coming up with the future of the eurozone. It's clear that at the moment Greece has accepted its destiny, if you wish, that they are trying to comply with the latest austerity being imposed by other nations and, of course, by the Troika, by the IMF, the ECB and the European Commission. But they are losing control of their own country. They don't like it. They're getting poorer. They don't like it. And frankly, the situation is unsustainable. There has to be, at some point, some hope and optimism for Greece. Otherwise, they are obviously going to leave the eurozone.
Yeah. Do the severe budget cuts make economic sense in Greece?
It's possible to combine fiscal austerity, cuts in public spending, increases in taxes and so on, with economic improvement, with an improving economy. It's possible. It's been done many times around the world. Britain had something of this sort in the early 1980s. Ireland had it in the late 1980s. It can happen. But you need to combine the fiscal austerity with expansionary monetary policy. The problem that Greece has got at the moment is that it doesn't have its own monetary policy. Its monetary policy is imposed by the European Central Bank across the whole of the eurozone. So Greece itself, in fact, has got a combination of both severe fiscal austerity and a strict monetary policy, and things are getting worse and worse as the weeks go by.
Yeah. And if Greece goes, what happens next? The
problem of Greece is partly one of the precedent that's set. You see, there are a range of issues. At the most simplest level, if you like, what happens to all those contracts that are expressed in euros? There are all these bank deposits, these bank loans, all these government securities that are currently expressed in terms of euros. So a new Greek drachma comes along. Is your mortgage going to be expressed in euros or Greek drachma? The Greek drachma probably worth half of what the euro is worth. There are then some ramifications of that across the whole of the eurozone, because some banks hold claims on Greek banks. So if the Greek banks can't repay in euros, then that affects the solvency of banks in France and Germany and so on. We don't know what's going to happen.
It's going to be messy.
It's going to be messy. And that's why, to some extent, that there is this attempt to keep the show on the road, to somehow pretend that Greece is solvent, and to hope that somehow something's going to work out. In my view, it'd be best to get this out of the way, clarify the issue, and find out what happens. The currencies have broken up before, currency unions have broken up before. This is going to be a very, very bad one, because clearly when Greece does leave, the currency is going to collapse. And the longer that its departure is postponed, the worse that disintegration when it comes.
It's easy for you to say, I told you so. What would you say, what would be the best solution out of a crisis? The leaders of Europe need to decide on whether they are prepared to accept rapid inflation in order to keep the single currency zone in being. The problems of national solvency and then of the viability of the banking system can be solved relatively easily by a rapid inflation. A rapid inflation would reduce the value of the government debts. Obviously, there must be fiscal austerity at the same time. And a rapid inflation would also increase the value of real estate, houses, and so on, which mean the banks would again be solvent. And then, once you've had the inflation, you need to bring in a whole mass of rules which you really do respect. You really do respect what is called the Stability and Growth Pact, and you also need to have a lot more integration in terms of public finances and so on, a lot more understanding of what you're trying to do. I don't think that Germany, the Netherlands, and other North European countries are prepared to accept a rapid inflation over the next 5 or 10 years to keep the single currency together. What Draghi has done in the last few weeks is, in effect, invites a big inflation. It invites one, this huge increase in the European Central Bank balance sheet. We haven't got inflation at the moment. I think we have to just watch this space and see what happens. But I think there is a way out, which is rapid inflation. I don't think Germany, the Netherlands, and so on want that. So we may just watch this space. It's all a matter of events and personalities and so on. So there's a fierce debate now in the Netherlands about the euro, which we never really had before. One of the options being discussed is the formation of what they call the euro. It's like an euro for North European countries. Would you say that is a possibility? The economies are a lot more similar, or do you still have the problem of you still need to create a political union?
There is this talk of having a North European monetary bloc, a euro. Let me just first of all mention some key problems with that. One is you need to bring in this new currency, and all contracts got to be changed. And these changes of contracts are very awkward, they're a real nuisance, and if there's going to be a big devaluation between the euro and the existing eurozone, or the Spain, France, I'm not sure where France stands, all this, Spain, Italy, and so on, then there's a lot of implications for different groups. Exporters in Spain do well, exporters in the Netherlands do badly, and so on. Now, of course, when the euro came in, this was dealt with by having these long periods of a fixed exchange rate beforehand. But until national currencies, their fixed exchange rate, and all of the other. So this can't happen quickly. That was the way the euro began. There was a long period really from the mid-1990s through to about 1999 and so on. And maybe that would work, but then, you know, after it's set up and you've got all the problems of the contracts, the transition periods all sorted out, you then really do need to abide by the fiscal rules. You do need to sort out what the central bank is supposed to do. You really have to sort out what the lender of last resort role of the central bank is, all these things that weren't done properly in the Maastricht Treaty of 1992. Might work. Just watch this space, really. Britain would not want to join. I can assure you of that.
Yeah. And what about the other alternative, the return to national currencies like the Gilder?
In the Netherlands, there is a long tradition of stability associated with this link-up between the Gilder and the mark. Obviously predates the single currency. I would have thought that this would again be an arrangement that would emerge if national currencies were restored. And you can have separate currencies and still have the benefits of the stable exchange rate, as of course the Netherlands and Germany used to have. So I would have thought that in many ways that is probably the best answer for the Netherlands. There's very few complaints about the arrangement you've had over several decades. It's a huge topic. Unless the nations of Europe really want to form a political union, I think they should try and sort out how they break this thing up over time. It's so difficult to break up because of the implications for contracts and these other very technical issues.
Messy.
But it's be very, very messy, very untidy, yes.
Yeah. Let's speak about the role now the think tanks play in this. We've been looking now, Lombard Street Research have come into the picture with the Dutch because of the Freedom Party from Geert Wilders asked them to do a study. Mm-hmm. This is the institute you founded.
Yes.
With what aim did you found it and what was your reason behind it?
I'm probably known as Britain's leading monetarist economist, and we were very important in the 1970s and 1980s in changing the climate of debate in the view that monetary policy matters, monetary control is important to get inflation down and so on. In fact, really arguing for a kind of Bundesbank style of monetary management in our own country, in Britain. I set up Lombard Street Research really to preserve that tradition of analysis. But what it led on to was, in the debate about the single currency, it led on to this discussion of the advantages and disadvantages of the single currency. I might just say here, by the way, before I finish on that the Bundesbank in Germany was always known in the 1990s as being a very Eurosceptic institution, and it eventually accepted single currency, but with many reservations.
But that was because of the unification that was there.
They were worried about losing the power they had as being Europe's dominant central bank. And what has happened now is that the Bundesbank is only one voice on the ECB Governing Council. It cannot control what happens. And what many people believe is that the Bundesbank is very angry at what Mr. Draghi has done in his first few months as president of the ECB.
Yeah. Go back to what you did with Lombard Street Research. To what extent is this political, or is this pure economic research you're doing with an institute like this?
Monetarism was very much tied up with Thatcher. In the decades leading up to 1979, we had price and incomes policies to keep inflation down. We had active fiscal policy to manage the economy. And monetarism was opposed to both of those. It said the key to macroeconomic policy is to have stable growth of the quantity of money. And Thatcher, of course, wanted to bring prices and incomes policies to an end. They made the trade unions very powerful. She wanted to reduce the role of the state and the level of public spending to end that aspect of Keynesianism. And so the work I was doing at Lombard Street Research had a political message, if you wish. But
which was that? What was the political message?
The political message was to support what, if you like, Thatcher was doing. It was to support reducing the power of the trade unions, reducing the size of the state, controlling public spending, and so on, which I believe in all of that. But there was also valuable messages for investors, because there's a link between what's happening in the banking system, the amount of money in the economy, the link between that and inflation, interest rates, asset prices, stock market. And so the research was producing, if you like, a political message. But there's also a message for investors, which I sold to large financial institutions.
Yeah. Can you say there's been a shift for the role they've been playing in the economic debate from academics and universities towards think tanks, because they are thriving at the moment?
Okay, what I did was to set up a business. It was a business that was a kind of, it's partly business, partly research institute. There are think tanks that are not businesses at all. They depend on donations and subscriptions and so on. They appear to be more prosperous in Britain than in other European countries. But can I just say where they really stand out is in America. And what you tend to find in America is that the universities tend to be, what's the right word? In the American, they're liberal. The academics vote for the Democrats, and whereas the think tanks tend to be very conservative. And so you have a similar pattern, not quite the same degree, but a similar pattern in Britain, that the universities tend to be rather, I simplify, left-wing, socialist, and certainly university economists are. And the think tanks, they're a mix, but they include many that are very right-wing, pro-market and so on. Yeah, that's definitely the case, yes.
Yeah. There's many institutes like Lombard Street Research in London.
There are a range of these organisations. As I said, there are small think tanks with a budget, say, of £150,000. There are others that have got budgets of a few million pounds. They're not all right-wing. Some of them receive money from the government, some are entirely private sector. I should say that those are think tanks that depend on donations and subscriptions from members. Often not very well paid, by the way. And then there are the research departments of banks, brokerages, and so on in the City of London. And the customers of the banks and so on, they do need research. They need messages about foreign exchange, interest rate, masses of things that actually are very... So these research departments interact with the think tanks. And so there is a development of, if you like, informed opinion, often very high quality research, not coming from universities. And this has been quite important in British public debate. It certainly was important in the debate on the single currency in the 1990s.
Yeah, there's definitely a market out there for institutions like that to do their work.
Yes, I think...
Is the market grown?
The explanation for this is that London is the world's largest international financial centre. It has a lot of business for other countries. So there is a demand for research from large financial institutions, from companies too, when they're taking positions on foreign exchange, interest rates and so on. So there's a stream of revenue available to pay for high quality research on issues that are partly technical, partly to do with financial markets, but also to some degree they're political.
Yeah.
And this stems from the fact that London is the world's financial centre. Obviously, there are other financial centres in Europe, but they don't have the same, what's the right word, cumulative build-up of actually in there at the moment.
But does that mix well? The research part, you said that there's high quality research, but does it mix with the political? Doesn't influence the political, not also the research work in a certain direction? In other words, are you as free in your research with your scientific academic mind in looking at a problem if there's a certain political agenda as well?
Well, let me just say here that the way in which the research is paid for there are different sources of it. The key source is the large savings institutions, the pension funds, insurance companies, unit trust groups, and so on. And they actually pay, the amount of commission they give, it actually depends partly on the quality of the research. Okay.
So they have to perform.
They don't really say thank you because the research is Conservative or Labour or Lib Dem or whatever. They don't. They're paying for the quality of the research. I think there's then the think tank world where there's normally, not always, but usually a political slant as well. Again, there are issues here because often these think tanks are registered with the Charity Commission. They strictly are charities. And if you're a charity, you're not supposed to have a political message. Again, a difficult area. And then you get other, of course, the political parties have their own research departments. There's people move backwards and forwards between these different entities. You know, there's the research departments of the main political parties, there's the think tanks, there's the research departments in the city. So there's people going backwards and forwards all the time.
Yeah. Question it because if a political party like the Dutch Freedom Party asks for a study with an institute like Lombard Street Research, isn't it actually, why would they do it? Aren't they, my question is, aren't they actually ordering a study of which they know already the conclusions they're going to get because of the political angle of an institute like that?
That's a fair comment. Clearly, the different think tanks, the different research institutes, the different research departments of the brokerages and so on, they are known to have certain themes. And it's well known that from the day I set it up, really, back in 1989, Lombard Street Research is very Eurosceptic. We always, while I was there and still today, we were opposed to Britain's membership of the single currency area. Now, that could be expressed in various ways. I never denied, for example, that if nations became involved in this, those nations that had high bond yields at the start, you can make a lot of money through buying their bonds and making money convergence trade. That's a very important market message. But still, you could say these things about the fact that somebody has a point of view because it's to their benefit does not mean their technical arguments are wrong. And the technical arguments that I and other people set out at Lombard Street Research against single currency in the early 1990s have proved largely correct. And in that sense, I think this research exercise will be very worthwhile.
There's still proper research.
It's still proper research, yes.
Yeah. But still, you would be surprised, like the present chairman, Charles Dumas, has been known as a Euroskeptic. He's called, in the interview, the Dutch newspaper, the eurozone suicide pact. Economist, which is affiliated to the institute, Christopher Smallwood, wrote an essay why the euro needs to break up. If you know those things, it would be highly surprising, I think, if the conclusion of this new study would be the opposite.
In understanding why Britain didn't adopt the single currency, it is very important to realise that the public debate we had in the 1990s was of very high quality. Obviously, I was one of the participants in the debate, and I would say that, but it was of high quality. And you had to present your arguments clearly, you had to justify them by facts, they had to be logically correct. This was good, high-quality argument. You could say that that person is biased, he's got an interest in this, he's got nothing worthwhile to say. But if that person also produced high-quality arguments he could back up with facts, logic, reason, then he would win that debate, and we won that debate in our country because we produced good arguments. And let's be clear that because somebody's coming from a particular point of view, that does not mean they cannot produce good arguments.
Yeah. But I think my point is trying to make, I don't want to discredit the work they do, but you could discredit the decision of the Dutch political party, why they specifically went to the institute, because they have a political agenda as well, of course.
I perhaps am taking a bit of a leap here, but I think many people in Europe, in the eurozone, realised that Britain did the right thing. We were very suspicious of the single currency right from the start. Why? Because we had a big debate about this subject. Lombard Street Research was part of that debate. It is totally legitimate and fair for a Dutch political party to seek a research study from Lombard Street Research, and to, as a result of that, to get high quality arguments, high quality debating points, and to inject those into the Dutch political debate. It's totally fair, totally right.